Hello everybody, it's Miss Darling in the studio. Welcome. Today I wanted to show you this background that I had collaged on, and it is made strictly with, a backing sheet and then an assorted amount of tiny fabric end pieces and just whatever I happen to have. It's a leftover. I'll throw it all in a small container until I build up a whole bunch of them, and then I can use them in a different project at a different time. But I thought it would be fun to kind of pull a bunch of them out and see what I could do with them in one gigantic masterboard. Now, unfortunately, my piece of paper that I chose as a backing sheet isn't a full 8.5 by 11, and so it's only a partial masterboard as I would think of them. But we're going to make one using some of my other ends and bits and pieces, and I will use an 8.5 by 11 backing sheet for the one we're going to make. But I wanted to show you how this turned out in terms of copying it, and you can see that the copy version is much more diluted and muted than the original is, and that may be something you like or something you dislike. Now, I don't generally like things for my journals that are too bright and gaudy, but that's a personal taste. And so from the standpoint of muting the colors, I probably prefer that. But on the other hand, you do lose some of the beauty that is in the original, and so perhaps somewhere in between the original and the copy would have been a nice place to land. But anyway, I can definitely use this. I made 2 copies, and you can, cut or tear your copy into smaller pieces and use them that way. You can turn this into 2 pages of a journal. For instance, if you had it this way, and you can decorate above and below, or you could tear this section off and glue it to some other background that is more fully developed already. I probably will take this and coffee dye it, and then let the coffee dye fill in the background above and below, and then I can, just fold this in and make it into 2 pages of a journal, and so that could be cool. Now, I just wanted to point out something color-wise. In the original, I started out with all these little pieces over here, which tended to be quite warm, and I eventually ran out of warm ones, so then I moved into some that I had that were cooler. And then at the end, I thought, well, I should try to bring back something that's warm to finish it off, and I had to go to a different container to be able to do that. But it's a little bit more evident, I think, in the original, where you go from the warm section to the cool section. But I noticed in the copy, it's not that noticeable. I mean, it pretty much all comes out muted, and the strong warmth, I should turn this way, the strong warmth that I had here doesn't look so warm anymore. And so in the copy version, it kind of comes out pretty cohesive in terms of temperature And so that's something to keep in mind. Now, of course, everybody's printer is different, and yours will not look like mine, but, you know, it doesn't matter. Anyway, let's get on with actually making one right now on camera. So instead of a white background, I'm going to use this kind of tan paper. It's cardstock. You want at least to have your background, I think, be cardstock so it has a little bit more structure to it and not so flimsy. And so I'm going to back out here. So hopefully I don't get out of frame at any time. I know that's really frustrating. So here's, I'm going to now pull fabrics from a different container, and we'll see what we can find. Okay, I have 2 containers here, and these essentially all have fabric scraps and nothing but fabric. I also have a container here that has you know, probably longer scraps. I know a lot of things in here are, you know, ribbons and you know, they're just longer pieces, but there are some smaller ones in here, so we can pull from any one of these 3 containers. And if, you know, a particular scrap is too big, like this is pretty big, we can always tear it down into another shape and size. Here's another one that's, you know, I would, well, look, let's see, this is a big whole square, so we would definitely be making this smaller if we use it. And here's a piece of paper that got in here. Anyway, you can see that, you know, this is just full of bits and pieces of fabric scraps that I've collected over the time. And I guess I should decide first on maybe this round having a specific color scheme in mind. And it's kind of going to be a little difficult because there's such a wide variety of colors in here, and I have no idea whether I have enough of, you know, any particular color or two that could, you know, fill up a whole sheet. And we got some yellow and red going on here. So this is the place where you try to pull out any and every little bit that would be appropriate color-wise to fit, you know, whatever type of masterboard you want to create. I'm liking this a lot, and there's a little bit of rose red in here. There's, of course, brown. There's some charcoal, a little bit of yellow tone or lighter brown over here. You know, that might be something we could build around. Here's a plum. I saw over here I had some, you know, I had this square here that has orange and purple. You know, that could you know, be a factor. The problem is, I don't think that I would ever make a journal with this as my predominant color scheme. So I don't think I want to focus on that as a palette. But now here's a long piece that was torn off of of some other piece that has these colors in it. So, you know, that definitely is something I would want to use. There's a... Now, it doesn't mean you can't add other colors into the palette, so long as they look good together. You know, I would not be opposed to pulling in some of the plum. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, I like that together, and this brings some pattern. You know, maybe, you know, this is maybe a real good strong possibility here that I could find enough to go in. I want to make room to sit this down where you can still see it, and then we can commence with looking for additional scraps that we could use. Now, in a, you know, when I'm working with paper, I have generally chosen a specific papers that go together color-wise, and I always try to go from one value to the extreme other. And what I mean by that is from light to dark and back again. And I think that makes a richer, more interesting masterboard. So we got a little bit of that berry color in here, but there's also a very light background. So that might be something we consider adding into our mix, which helps us change our values so it's not all the same. If your values don't change, believe me, it's not going to be as successful as you would want it to be. So I'm just grabbing up anything I can find here that might be able to be worked in. We audition everything, so, you know, if we pull out something that ultimately doesn't work, it's no big deal. But we want to have lots of choices to choose from. And so you want to be somewhat restrictive, but don't go overboard and get so restrictive that you don't have enough to work with, because that defeats the whole purpose. So anyway, just continuing on, looking for, you know, colors that seem pretty good, but also looking for pattern differences and value differences, and just whatever I can find. So, you know, I mean, you don't have to do an 8.5 by 11 sheet, which would give you 2 pages in a standard size journal. You could just, you know, do half that size, and so that you can come up with 1 page at least. So since I've got some purple in there, let's, you know, pull this out. I don't think it'll work, but that's what I mean by don't be overly restrictive, but do be restrictive to a degree so you're not overwhelmed by tons of pieces that have no business being considered. And that may be pretty much all I'm going to find in here. This is a multicolored piece. You know, it could work somewhere, even if just a little bit of it is used. So I think that let's take a look at my other container here and see what we can find. Okay, here's our basics color scheme over here, and you could use paper mixed with your fabrics if you want to. I'm just challenging myself on trying to do it all just with fabrics because it helps use up a whole bunch of things I have that are just sitting here in containers and not doing anybody any good but taking up space. And I like a challenge. I also like the more consistency of everything being fabric instead of a combination. Though I do combinations much of the time. I tend not to use combinations when I'm trying to do, a full masterboard. I usually will do that on a smaller plane. But it doesn't matter. Whatever you have to work with is what you work with. And, I go from there. I got some sparkly here we might find a use for. Not having a whole lot of success over here. I seem to have more neutrals over here. And the pieces aren't as big. I do have other fabrics hidden away in other containers I can pull out at the end if I absolutely get desperate, but I thought I would first try using what I can from these containers. They're the ones I go to the most often. Okay. For instance, here's a much bigger container, and you can see I have bits and pieces over here as well. These might be bigger, but ooh, some beautiful things over here. Here's a piece from fabric I made using pens, I think, and creating different textured backgrounds. I don't know why it's so faint. It must have been maybe a ghost of some kind from something else. Okay. I really should put all these little bits and pieces in those other containers if they'll fit, because sitting over here in this container, there obviously have been overlooked for a long period of time, and that's just going to continue unless I move them. These are all, you know, just scraps from projects that I've worked on over the last couple of years. I've been doing this. It's amazing how your supplies seem to just magically grow and expand on you, whether you like it or not. If you're working on a regular basis, you're just going to naturally create other types of fabrics or papers, things that you didn't necessarily start out with. Well, they were on something bigger, so you started out with it, but you end up with all these myriad of pieces. You know, these, ooh, beautiful. So this could, you know, definitely work. This is a heavier fabric almost. This is upholstery fabric here. And it remains to be seen whether it's going to work out combining that with these thinner fabrics, these cotton pieces that I have so much of. Okay, well, I think that's about it for now. Just gonna, well, I guess I'll try to reorganize this at another time. Don't try to do it on camera. So, but as you can see, this was just a plain cardboard box that something came in, and I saved it and decided to use it as a container to keep my supplies. And so I collaged the outside using similar fabrics that I had done for other boxes until I got something that I thought was really unique and fun and very creative to have sitting in my studio. So, you know, just pass that on. I recently uploaded a video on repurposing medication bottles. And so be sure and watch that if you're interested in doing things, you know, crafting that is beyond and different from making journals. Anyway, this was also the type of thing that I've done a lot of. And I have many boxes that I have turned into works of art. And here's the last one I'm going to look in. This is another example of a box that I collaged on. Whoops. This isn't going to do it all. I have a lot of my honest to goodness real vintage lace in here, and not pieces that were coffee dyed to look old, but are actually old. So this is my last one. We'll see if there's anything in here. This is kind of bright, but who knows? Here's some burgundy sari silk. That could work in some way. You might find this is just too tedious for you to want to bother with. That's okay. I'm just on this long, determinative track of trying to just use up what I have on hand rather than buying anything new. So these days, the only things that I buy are, you know, if I'm running low on copy paper or photo paper, I'll, you know, restock some paper, but for the most part, I've really stopped purchasing altogether. I do have a ton of fabrics, but they're, you know, real large pieces that I'm saving to use on specific projects in the future. So I really only want to look at scraps for today. So if every piece that I've pulled out was workable, I think I've got enough here to create something nice. Definitely if I were to just slap down a huge piece like this, but when I'm doing bits of collage, I don't cheat and just throw down huge pieces and call it a day. I think it's important to cut them or tear them up into smaller pieces, and which forces you to be creative with what you turn out. And so don't take the easy road. Challenge yourself to explore your full creative abilities and do something really unique and wonderful that required some thought and talent to achieve. That's how I look at it. Tell me in the comments if you feel differently, that it doesn't matter to you, or that you don't like this process anyway, and so you don't care. Let me know what you think, and can maybe have a discussion going. I just feel like I don't want anything to go to waste. I want to give everything a chance at being upcycled into something beautiful and worth keeping. Everything here is dark. We don't want to just use dark pieces, so we do want to have a little bit of change up in our values. And I don't see this fitting in. So, okay. This is what I'm going to start with, and I like torn edges instead of... Now I'm going to tear this right about here where the colors change from the light to the darker. So that gives me a nice light piece to work in somewhere, or partially light. And then this is too big, and so, but I don't want to just cut it in half, so I'm going to go just on the other side of this element here, and then this piece will be a little bit bigger than the other one. That's another thing. You want to have different sizes and different shapes, and that helps you make something interesting. This too is too big, so I'm going to cut tear right through here. I don't want to tear through the bird's face. So we have that, and then we have this. I guess I tore into his beak a little bit. So I'm going to tear here when I get to the end of the bird's body. So now instead of one larger piece, I have 3 pieces that I can spread light value into my masterboard, but they're all different sizes. Okay, I like this for pattern. I'm going to keep these two roses together and just tear it on the other side. So I have that, and this time I have a larger flower, and I'm going to keep it all to itself and tear. So I want you to see how I'm being strategic pattern-wise, not just randomly tearing here and tearing there without any thought. Here's a single medium-size flower, so I'm going to keep that. So I'm getting different widths here. Now we have a large flower to go. This time I'm going to come all the way over here. Maybe I'll keep two flowers in this one. So this is an extra long piece. And that gives me 4 in this piece. That's enough for now. I'm not going to up this whole section because I will no doubt one day want to use it for something else. So here we have, I'm going to put these piles of smaller pieces off to the side. I have loved this fabric ever since I first bought. I buy fabrics from time to time in quarter fats, which gives me enough fabric to use it to cover the entire outer part of a journal. You know, the cover, the spine, and the back piece. And then once I use it, I wind up with smaller bits like this. So here again, I'm going to use my pattern of the piece to help me determine a logical place to end a particular section. Right here, we're going to go right through here, and so there'll be a little bit of this charcoal color that will appear on this particular piece. You see? And then we've got this, and I've got this. So I've got one larger piece and a couple smaller ones, but then we also have this, which looks like it came from an entirely different piece of fabric. Isn't that interesting? And that gives me one piece that's very dark value. And so on we go with trying to create different values that we use throughout our masterboard. Now you can see as I've laid this out how easy it would be to get a masterboard without cutting any of these pieces up. But like I said earlier, that's not the point of what I like to do. Now, this upholstery fabric I'm not going to be able to tear. So I'm going to look at both sides. Both sides have a different pattern. And I believe this is the right side up, and this is the background. You see how different they are. So there's a natural break in color right there. So I'm going to stay with that and just cut this piece off. So that can be one piece. And then for variety, I'm going to flip over here and take this section right here. And I think I'll stop here because these pieces are fairly sizable, and they may be all I need, because I also have this piece here that came from the same fabric. And so pattern wise, I hate to lose one side or the other. They're so beautiful. Even the wrong side looks beautiful. Okay, but anyway, I've got these two rectangles could be used vertically or horizontally, and I have a natural break in the pattern right here, so I'm going to pull off this piece and just stay with 3. I can always get more if I need to, but I don't want to cut any more off a large piece than I have to, because I don't know what my needs will be in the future. Alright. Okay, now this piece here is a collage of many different fabrics, it looks like. And I think I will kind of stick with the borders that the pattern itself has created. So I've got this, and what shall we do? I've got a definite difference, demarcation going on here. So now a piece like this could be a focal point. So, you know, I might ultimately decide to use something like this, because the pattern in itself helps draw your eye specifically to this piece, as opposed to other pieces that might be near it. But I'm going to put that decision off until later, because I don't know that I will, you know, want an actual focal point, or whether that would be the one I would want to use anyway. So I love this in here. So I'm going to split this up right here. And I'm going to pull this charcoal black section out. If you've watched me for any length of time, you should have figured out that I love black. It is the most dramatic color, in my humble opinion. Now here's a very loose kind of boho feeling. I'm going to give myself a smaller piece. And then a larger. This is kind of more of a square. I hope you find this commentary helpful to you. If so, let me know in the comments. I'm trying to kind of give you a glimpse into the things I think about as I'm creating. I know I appreciate knowing what other artists think about and why they choose what they choose. And so that might be helpful to you. I think we could use something kind of long and narrow. So this continues on with some warmth. I think we can always come back to a piece like this and pull something else from it. I got some threads here that are giving me a hassle. So these are pieces that are already small that kind of fit in. And so let's just pull them out now. So we have a nice grouping of them. Okay. There's a little bit of a kind of a muted teal. Now if you have another color that is quite different from the majority, don't think that you can't use it. What you need to do then, if you include it and it stands out like a sore thumb, just add a little bit more of it elsewhere and it will settle down and you know, not take over. So that's just a little tip there. And when I mean add more, I mean sprinkle things around. And, you know, so like maybe divide if you're using a sheet like I'm doing to have 2 pages worth, have a little bit of each on each side. Sprinkle things around. I also tend to use odd numbers, mostly 3. I don't always have 3 of the same thing in, but Greeks worked it out a long time ago as to what's most pleasing to the eye, and they determined in the end that odd numbers work best. So when you're, you know, working, keep that in mind, that there's just something magical about 3 or 5, even 1, but more so 3 and 5 of an item. And it's not a hard, fast rule, but I think if you keep it in mind and utilize it as you make your plans, you will likely find your finished product is more successful. And so, okay. Now I wanted this for its dark value. This, I think, had some elastic inside it that has ceased to exist. Or maybe it was just, you know, gathered. But I'm going to cut off this staple and kind of see. It could be hollow. I don't know if it's hollow inside or not. But anyway, I like it because it's a solid piece in something very busy. Gives the eye a place to rest. And that's important too. So, you know, bear that in mind. So now we've got a large solid square here that will flatten out as it's glued down, and A little clumping going on here. So I'm going to cut that off. So I'm going to want another smaller piece, and then maybe one larger piece. Oh, there was something inside. Yeah, piece of elastic. Bye-bye. That's the thing about elastic and rubber bands. They do not stay tight forever. So I try to stay away from them. I would prefer that what I make, you know, in fact, I was rummaging through my jewelry box last night and doing a little reorganizing and reminding myself of jewelry I bought at some time in my life. I'm at a point now where I'm always surprised at what I've got because I don't remember ever buying it. So I forgot why I even mentioned that. The joys of getting old. How many of you find your memory isn't what it used to be? Let me know in the comments. I might like a little bit. Okay, here. This is a bit transparent, but I think it's finally have a place to, you know, use it up. It's been floating around for quite some time and always has gotten itself rejected. So maybe this time we'll cut it down into 3 smaller pieces, and so maybe it'll finally find a home. Okay, I think I have enough here to work with, and so let's push on. I am going to use a glue stick because it's just so much quicker and easier to use than my fabric glue. And so I'm going to come back afterwards and sew around the perimeter and sew over it to strengthen. I did not do that with this, but then I'm not working with this itself. I'm working with copies of this. So it just depends on how much usage you plan to give something, whether you need to use a stronger, longer lasting glue, or whether you need to sew over the finished result so that you don't have anything that pops off. And, you know, that's going to vary depending on what your usage is. So I think I'll just separate my groupings here out into, you know, individual places around my substrate, and That way I can visually see everything I have to work with at any one point in time. And then we'll chip away. The other useful thing is you might want to keep your piles, your darks, close to other darks, and like I'm going to put this more warm, the warm pieces up here kind of together, and then these are sort of a combination of warm and cool. So we do that. These are pretty cool down here. I'll move this up there. So just organize a little bit to help you make your choices as you start laying things down. Now the next thing is, it's a little more daring to just plop a piece down and go ahead and glue it in place. I like to instead kind of lay out at least some of the basics to get me going before I start gluing. I mean, ultimately it's going to look pretty haphazard to try to just lay everything out. I'm thinking this could be a focal point that I either use that way, or my pages ultimately are going to be taller than they are wide. So I think this might be a lovely focal point to have on my right side of the page. And so I think I'll put that in position there. And looking for my ruler. I like to know always exactly where my center lies. So here's 5.5 is half of 11 inches. I marked that, but gosh darn, I can't see it. Okay, so always know where your center is, because if you're going to fold this or cut this into 2 pages of equal size, then you need to know where your center is. Now I try not to put a single piece over my center line. You can do that, of course, but it does, it's going to eventually cut that piece smaller, and then it might not be located quite where you thought you were going to have it. So bear that in mind. And so I think I'm going to butt that up with one of these falling, right about in there. I am going to keep my lines different. I'm not going to butt this right up, and match line for line. That's not good design. So, place this one a little lower than the other one. So now I've got some light over here, but nothing yet on the opposite side. So I have just one small piece that mimics that, which maybe could be used maybe on the outside, just so I have some on each side is my goal. Okay, this has strong pattern like this does. But since I have this over on this side, I think I will put something similar on the other side. And then take a smaller piece of that to throw in over here. I hope this makes sense. I'm just thinking out loud. Okay, so this goes with that. And this is a third piece. We have this over here, so let's put one, maybe this darker one over here. That's kind of a nice corner piece, maybe. And I might like to use all three pieces, so maybe that one can go down there, which works nice for balance. Now these are quite different. These are going to draw attention not only because they're a dark purple, but they're have no design. They're just solid. And so if I put one there, I think I would turn it like that. Then I want one on the other side. Maybe that can go up here. You see, so what I'm actually doing, if I use the three pieces, I'm trying to put one on one side, one on the other, but then maybe triangulate where they fall. So maybe I'll do this over here so that, you know, I've got this triangle going. Here I've got more of a diagonal line going, which is okay. I don't think we'll use that yet. Got some nice pattern here. Let's start on this side. I need something decent to anchor this down here. I consider my corners places to anchor. Let me push this up a little bit so it's not falling out of place. Here's a black that could anchor that down there. Okay. So I think maybe I can use something like that there, and then something over here, and something up there. And maybe I'll split the difference. I'll break my rule and have a piece like that. I'm not interfering with the pattern in any way by crossing over my center line. Now, do I want to bring in some more light to mix it up? I've got a light piece here. Or I could go up higher. Maybe I'll move you over. I don't want my bird at the bottom, but maybe he could go over here. And then I can put that one in there. And this smaller one could maybe go over here. So I'm triangulating, okay? I like that there. So this piece, here's another one off of it, I think. This piece is off of that. So now we're getting down to the harder part of figuring out where everything should go. You know, it's quite easy when you start out, you know, I'll put this here, put that there, you know, that kind of thing. And then you get down to the end, and now you're really having to focus in on color and pattern and, you know, balance and distribution, and making sure that, I said I really wanted to try to use these finally. Now realize that as you go along, you want to overlap as much as possible, because you really don't want that the background of your substrate to show through. So keep that in mind. Now I'm looking at where my darks fall, where my lighter ones fall, how much pattern do I have? Is it ultimately going to work out? Do I have enough to overlap properly and not see gaps? And so on. So I'm really coming up toward being able to see this, how this is really going to come out. I really love this piece, and so I want to find a place for it, a place of importance. I may have to place that later. I have some of it here, so I probably should think in terms of putting this other piece on this side. You know, so maybe it could go in there, and this still, you know, maybe is just something that is used to overlap. And okay, I'm liking what I have. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section if you think this will work for you too. And let me know too if you have questions. Well, why did you do this? Or why didn't you do that? Or I thought this would go there, you know, that kind of thing. Let me know. I'm trying to make sure I go from light to dark, that my pieces are varied in size and shape, and that I have good distribution of pattern and color, and that it looks reasonably balanced, that nothing jumps out and just takes over the whole board. And so that becomes your focal point if that happens. And you know, you have to decide yourself whether you like that or not. You gotta get a little sip of juice. Okay, I'm going to start, well, I think I'm going to start laying in my corners first. That's always a good starting point, because you know you've got to have it fill out right to the corner and to the ends of your substrate. So it's good to lock those in first when it comes down to gluing. Now I got some little bit of overlap of fabric there where they sewed over it. So I'm going to put that at the top. And here I laid the sewing down up there, but maybe I want to turn this upside down, so that's, although I like it, I think I'd like it to show. If I put it, all of it there on the edge of the substrate, it's going to ultimately be cut off when I make a copy, and it's not even going to show up. And I kind of like seeing that sewed part. Adds a little extra. So I'm going to put it up there. Now, okay, there's another piece there. I'll sew that one down a little later. Oh, I've got a corner piece here. I tend to favor darker colors on my corners, especially on the bottom, because for me, when I look at the masterboard or the individual pages, I like strength, and darker colors give a perceived value of being heavy and weighted, and so I like having something dark that feels like it's supporting what's above it, if that makes sense. So that's why I try to lock in my corners as early as possible, and particularly on what will be the bottom of the masterboard or the bottom of the 2 pages will be visually supportive of everything above. So, keep that in mind. If that works for you, use it as a guide. Here again, I'm putting in a dark piece right here on the bottom. You don't have to make all of them dark. You don't want to see a string of just really dark going across the bottom, but you do want to anchor everything a bit. Just don't go overboard. And also avoid butting up your edges in a way that creates a solid line going across or up and down. You want it to be jagged. You don't want to see some specific line going across or up and down. And the way to avoid that, of course, is to stagger where your corners arrive and are set down. Now, I just, every piece I do, my method changes a little bit, and it's all directed by the piece itself. Some places I feel I want to lock in right away, and others I don't, and there's no way I can predict that or even really explain it to you, because it's different every time around. It's just, you just have to use your senses and determine, okay, where do I go next? And so I decided I'm going to go right next, and here I went right next, and now I may pop back over on this side and determine what goes down next over here, because the pieces that go down first are the ones that are going to be overlapped by other pieces. So you have to look at a piece, and if it's really beautifully frayed on one side or two sides or whatever, I like that fraying to show in the final piece. So I'm going to glue it down at the end so that I make sure the ends or sides or corners of that piece don't get hidden by a different fabric. But, you know, that's just how I work and think and do what works for you. So, I think I'm going to go with this one next. The other thing I think of too when I'm trying to decide the bottom and the top and so forth is, if I see a piece that's has more fraying on one side than another, I try to get that piece glued down more into the center of my board instead of along the edge, because it's just going to get lost. And this has some really nice fraying there. I don't want that to get covered over by this piece that doesn't have so much. So I'm not going to press down that one corner yet. I'm going to get this piece laid in and then press down the corner that I want to save. That makes sense. Okay, this is going to drop in here. But this piece is going to lay on top. Okay. Now ultimately that might get covered over anyway, but I try to save it from the beginning if I can, and then move on from there. Now, I try to overlap as little as possible in terms of how much I'm covering up, because once you get these glued down, if you've done, if you've overlapped too much of another piece, you might find yourself with a hole that needs covering at the end, whereas you thought you had enough pieces down there. Suddenly there's a hole that's popped up on you, and for no other reason than because you did a little bit, you overlap by a little too much. So see, I'm locking in this down here, and I'm not going to have any holes left except right up there, because this is a small piece. In fact, I think maybe I might turn that up here so this darker is up there. But I don't have any hole that has surfaced along here that is a result of having overlapped too much. Okay, so there's my bottom. So now where do I go? Good question. This I want specifically in this position. This, if I had a focal point, this would be it, and I want it above center, all the way on the right side, but above center. So I don't want this flower here down here throwing off my balance and what I perceive as being the best place for it. So I'm going to go ahead now and lock this in and build around it. Now, if you're going to ultimately sew on top of your masterboard to hold everything in place, you don't have to put as much glue down on each piece, because you're going to come back over and lock it in with your sewing machine. However, I don't know that I'm going to do that, so that's why I'm trying to put quite a bit of glue on each piece to make sure it's pretty well locked in. Once you've made the copies that you've made, or I encourage you to scan, if you can, scan the image so you always have a file that you can use to print off. But once you've done that, you can come back and cut up your board any way you want. So, you know, there's that as well. And once you cut something into a smaller section, it may very well alter the balance that you had created for that section. And but that's the fun and challenge of it, is you know, so much depends on what you plan to use your masterboard to achieve for you. I'm not getting out as much of these wrinkles as I want to get out, so I'm going to put more glue there so I can really try and press them out. Obviously, if you're more organized than I am, you would have cut this up before and ironed it out. But, you know, I'm not even opposed to having wrinkles stay in it, because we're talking grunge here, folks. I'm going to turn this the opposite way that I had laid it out, which may, no, maybe I don't want that quite there. Maybe I want it over here. Yeah, I'm going to alter my layout a little bit, which of course you're free to do anytime you get ready to. Just know that altering one piece could cause you to have to alter several more after. Okay. That opened up a nice little place for me to insert this smaller piece. I need something taller now there than what I have, because I altered my design, which is leaving me with a hole coming out. Boy, does that jump out. I like it up this way. You know, that's real close to my so-called focal point, so I'm okay with that. It covers over the hole that got created because I changed my design. All right. The nice thing about fabric is that it will stretch if you need it to. You can get it sometimes to stretch, as I just did with this piece, which you cannot do with paper. Paper's just not going to stretch for you. So that's an advantage to working with fabric. Alright, I hope you can see how this is starting to come together. And alright, let's work on this side now. I want to lock in the position of this piece here. This one actually ends down here, but it's now being covered over with that, so visually it ends up here. So I think we'll just drop this in right there. So I'm not lined up with this line. If I come up higher, I create this opening down here, which is awkward. So I think I'm going to drop that in there, so I don't have an awkward section to have to solve. I just have one little piece there that something will have to fill. Now, maybe that could. Here is my center line. Okay, coming right through there. That's the center. So if I look at it this way, how is that lining up? I think we're doing good. So I'm going to use this piece to cover up that little awkward section that I'm left with. and I'm putting the darkest side of this little piece over here, just over the center line. So I'm preserving the mimicking of this flower for the back page. So let's say this is my front page and this is my back page. So I've got some of that over here on the opposite page. All right, now I've totally lost where I was going with my design. So now I have to completely readjust what I'm doing over here. I think maybe we'll drop that in there. This, my bird, I wanted up reasonably high, so my bird is, because my bird is looking up, so I want to honor that. What's he looking to? I'm repeating this over here. Maybe I'll move that up to the top. Okay. You can see as you get farther and farther into the piece that your decisions become more critical, I'll say. Maybe more difficult, but certainly more critical. Okay. I don't want to cut off my bird. So I think I'm going to move that down here. And maybe move that up there. Yeah, I think we're winding it down, and we'll be able to resolve all issues by the time we're done. I think I can cover over this abstract piece more easily than I can a piece that has a representational design. So I'm going to drop this in here. What I meant was, this piece has 2 roses and a significant 3-leaf design here, which is harder to put on the bottom and place something on top. It's better to leave that be the piece that you glue on top. And I just happened to see, I laid this one down upside down. There's certain designs that you really need to put in a certain way, and you don't want to put them upside down. That just doesn't look good. All right. This one is a little more suitable to fill in that up there, but not quite. Let's see. I'm switching out for this piece here. This has some bright yellow in it, which is going to be more similar to what we have here, and by adding that there, it helps tone this down so that you're just not totally drawn to that part, because that is not my focal point. And so, and this piece also will cover the board, so there's no part sticking out that, or I don't want the substrate showing through. So I needed something a little bit bigger, and so yeah, that works. And then this one's going to go up there. And so you can see, here's my dividing line right here. Okay, so those pieces on the left pretty much don't, they're not overlapping onto this side, and these are not overlapping onto that side necessarily anyway. Okay, what have we got left here? Okay, my bird's gonna go there. This is going to drop down there. I don't need this then. This is the same fabric as that, so now we're going to drop down there. And then I just have this awkward section here, and I could literally put something like that in there. Okay, I'm going to drop in the outer pieces first, so I make sure the edge of my substrate is always fully covered. And put my bird in next. Oh, that was going to cover up my bird too much. I need to come down lower. Okay, now all right, and finally and there we have it. What do you think? Do you think my colors are well distributed? Do you think there's a lot of interest there? It is very busy, as they always are. That's where making sure that your colors feel good together, working together, helps a lot, because if they don't feel good next to each other, then no matter what you've done, you're not going to be pleased with how it looks. So I'm going to pause this for a few minutes. I'm going to go down to my printer and print this off, and let's see what our copies look like. Okay, I'm back. Now, previously in this video, I talked about my copy coming out duller, more muted than the original. And of course, it's not ever going to be as strong as your original. No reproduction ever is. But this time around, I decided to print my masterboard off on 3 different types of paper, because they want you to see the difference that your paper can make in how your design comes out. Okay, so here's my original. This is what it looks like on regular 20-pound bond paper. This is probably about the least expensive paper that you can buy in a ream anyway. Okay, so that's the 20-pound, which I would normally use. Sometimes I've used a heavier weight. This is 20 pounds. Sometimes I've used 24 pound as for pages inside a journal. I don't like to go any heavier than that unless you're talking about the cover of a signature. I often do my covers for a signature on cardstock, but because I don't think, I'd like the signature itself to be a little more protected than you can get with just 20-pound paper. So I'll often use cardstock for that purpose. But anyway, so this would be more the type of paper I would use inside. This is presentation paper. Now it's a step up from bond and gives a little brighter reproduction of the images. There's not a huge amount of difference, but there is a difference. Now this paper is weighted a little more like 24-pound paper would be weighted, and could be used definitely, you know, as a regular page within a journal. obviously presentation paper is going to be more expensive than bond, and so you have to take that into consideration. But it did get a little bit better representation of the image. And now this is photo paper, and photo paper is probably the most expensive that you would ever want to consider when doing a journal. And it's not as heavy, as sturdy as cardstock, but it's almost very similar to cardstock in terms of its pliability and the weight of it. But it gives, obviously, the best reproduction from the original. You can see that's pretty darn close. Oh, I guess I have this upside down. Sorry about that. Okay, you can see that's pretty close. But that's photo paper. That's quite a bit more expensive. You probably would only want to use that maybe for a cover of a signature. I don't think it's probably strong enough to use as a cover for a whole journal, but certainly would be very beautiful as the cover of a signature within a journal. Or you could obviously glue something like this as your inside back, so that this would be the back of your cover, and then this side would form the back of the cover at the end of a journal. I would definitely do something like that. And I think it turned out very pretty and very creative, and was just literally fun to do. And so I hope you've learned a lot when it comes to design theory and color theory, as I've tried to fill in some of the things that I think about that maybe if you've never studied art or design, you would have no way of knowing. And so I hope this has been a really valuable teaching moment, as well as a demo. And I'm just personally very pleased with how it came out. And I would know what you think as well. And hope I've inspired you to pull out all your fabric scraps, or even your paper scraps, and have at it. Play around, and obviously the more you make, the better you get at doing it. And so I encourage you to practice, 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 as you would have to do in virtually everything that is new to you that you want to learn. So thanks for being with me all this time. If you're here, tell me that you watched it all the way to the end. I would like knowing. There are so many people that just flee almost instantly. And so if you stayed with me this long, I would appreciate knowing who you are. So do that for me, will you? And thanks for your loyalty and for your patience, and I've appreciated it so much. This is Miss Darling calling this a wrap. Bye-bye.